In this video, we're taking you deep into one of the most terrifying encounters a solo sailor can face, an orca attack in the wild waters of the Johnstone Strait. This isn't a story of myths or legends. It's real, raw, and happened to a man who thought he knew what to expect from the sea, but nature had other plans. You'll witness how a quiet solo journey turned into a fight for survival when a powerful orca rammed his vessel without warning. We'll break down exactly what happened, why orcas sometimes behave aggressively, and the critical steps every sailor should know if this ever happens to them. From understanding orca behavior to reinforcing your boat's defenses and reacting under pressure, this video is packed with insights that could one day save your life. And beyond the shock of the incident lies a powerful message about respect, preparation, and the unpredictable power of the ocean. So hoist your curiosity and hold your course. This is one story you won't want to miss. And once you've heard it, we want to know, what would you have done in his place? Don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the bell icon for more gripping sea stories and survival lessons from the open water. Let's get started. The sun had barely risen above the horizon, casting a golden glow over the calm waters of the Johnstone Strait. Alex, a 38-year-old marine biologist, stood at the bow of his sailboat, the Aurora, a 35-foot sloop he had painstakingly restored over 5 years. The boat, with its dark blue hull and impeccably trimmed white sails, rocked gently as Alex held a steaming mug of coffee, the vapor rising in spirals that mingled with the salty air. He took a deep breath, inhaling the scent of distant pines and the damp touch of the morning breeze. He was alone, but he didn't feel lonely. The sea had always been his home, and the Johnstone Strait, with its deep waters and vibrant wildlife, was the perfect stage for the adventure he had planned for months. Alex was no novice. With over a decade studying marine mammals, he had sailed through rough seas in Alaska, weathered storms in the South Pacific, and spent nights counting stars under the Caribbean sky. But the Johnstone Strait was different, almost mystical. He had heard stories from sailors about the orcas that patrolled these waters, their dorsal fins slicing through the surface like black blades. As a biologist, Alex knew that the northern resident orcas, which fed on salmon, were the most common here, but there were also the transient orcas, relentless hunters of seals and sea lions. He wanted to see them up close, to observe their behavior in their natural habitat, far from the crowds of tourists and whale-watching boats. This trip was more than a scientific expedition. It was a personal quest, a way to reconnect with the nature he had devoted his life to understanding. The Aurora was anchored in Telegraph Cove, a small village at the northern tip of the strait, known as a starting point for those venturing into these waters. The previous night, Alex had spent hours poring over nautical charts, plotting his route with precision. The Johnstone Strait was no place for improvisation. Its currents could reach up to 7 knots, capable of dragging an unprepared boat into whirlpools or sandbanks. The winds, funneled by the high mountains and fjords flanking the channel, could shift direction in minutes, turning a calm afternoon into a battle against 30-knot gusts. Alex had consulted tide tables, marking the times of ebb tide when the currents flowed south, helping to propel the boat. He planned to sail about 40 nautical miles to Port Neville, a sheltered anchorage midway through the strait, where he could rest before continuing. In the cockpit of the Aurora, Alex checked the GPS and the VHF radio, ensuring both were functioning. He had an EPIRB, an emergency transmitter that could alert the Coast Guard in case of trouble, and an inflatable life raft secured at the stern. The boat was equipped with a 30-horsepower Yanmar auxiliary engine, but Alex preferred to rely on the sails whenever possible. There was something pure about sailing with the wind, a dance between man, boat, and the elements. He adjusted the mainsail, hoisting it with steady movements, and unfurled the genoa, the headsail, which snapped open with a satisfying crack. The Aurora began to move, slicing through the water with grace, as Alex held the helm, feeling the boat's response as an extension of himself. The first few hours were peaceful. The wind blew at 10 knots from the northwest, ideal for maintaining a steady speed of 5 knots. Alex sailed parallel to the Vancouver Island coast, keeping a safe distance from the submerged rocks dotting the shore. He used binoculars to scan the horizon, searching for signs of wildlife. Gulls circled overhead, occasionally diving for fish, and in the distance he spotted a bald eagle gliding above the treetops. But it was the orcas he longed to see. He knew the strait was a vital corridor for them, especially in summer when salmon migrated in large schools. Alex kept a notebook nearby, ready to record any sightings, but for now, the sea remained silent. As he sailed, Alex reflected on his life. He had grown up in a small inland town far from the ocean, but as a child, he was captivated by documentaries about marine life. At 15, he convinced his parents to take him to an aquarium, where he saw an orca for the first time. That animal, with its raw power and almost human intelligence, had changed something in him. He decided he would dedicate his life to understanding these creatures, not in captivity, but in their natural environment. Now, at 38, he felt he was exactly where he was meant to be, even if it meant being alone on a boat in the middle of a wild strait. Around noon, the wind began to pick up, climbing to 15 knots. Alex adjusted the sails, furling the Genoa slightly, to prevent the boat from heeling too much. He checked the GPS again, confirming he was nearing Blackney Passage, an area where the strait narrowed, intensifying the currents. The tide tables indicated the ebb was at its peak, and the Aurora accelerated, reaching nearly 7 knots. The sensation was exhilarating, but demanded total focus. Alex kept one hand on the helm and the other ready to adjust the sheets, the ropes controlling the sails. He knew any mistake here could throw him against the reefs or send the boat spinning out of control. That's when he saw the first sign. In the distance, a black dorsal fin sliced through the water, followed by another. Orcas. Alex's heart raced. He grabbed the binoculars, trying to identify the group. There were at least 3, moving in sync, their backs gleaming in the sun. He shut off the auxiliary engine, which was on standby, to reduce noise, and let the Aurora glide silently with the sails. The orcas were about 200 meters away, swimming in the same direction as him, south. Alex opened his notebook, jotting down, quickly, "Group of 3 orcas, possibly residents, tall dorsal fins, hunting behavior." He leaned over the rail, awestruck. The orcas dove and resurfaced, their breaths creating jets of mist that hung in the air. He tried to determine if they were residents or transients. The residents, which he had studied extensively, had more curved dorsal fins and lived in stable family groups. Transients, on the other hand, were more elusive, with straighter fins and smaller groups. These seemed like transients, but he needed a closer look to be sure. Alex decided to follow the group, keeping a respectful distance. He adjusted the Aurora's course, sailing parallel to the orcas, but the current was growing, stronger, and he needed to focus on the helm. The strait was treacherous here, with whirlpools forming where currents collided. He glanced at the GPS, confirming he was a few miles from Hansen Island, where he could anchor if needed. But the thrill of being so close to the orcas kept him focused. He grabbed his camera, snapping photos while trying to keep the boat steady. The orcas began to approach. One of them, the largest of the group, swam directly toward the Aurora, diving beneath the boat. Alex felt a chill. He knew orcas were curious, but he also knew interactions with boats were rare in the Johnstone Strait. He gripped the helm tighter, holding his course. The orca reappeared on the other side, its massive body brushing the surface. It was a female, likely a transient, judging by the straight dorsal fin and the lack of clear markings on the saddle, the area behind the fin. Suddenly the boat shuddered. A powerful impact came from the stern, making the Aurora lurch. Alex nearly lost his balance, clutching the helm. He looked back and saw the Orca slapping its tail against the rudder, as if playing. But the impact didn't feel playful. The rudder held, but Alex heard a troubling crack. He rushed to the stern, checking the steering system. The rudder still responded, but there was an unnatural looseness, as if something was misaligned. Stay. Calm, Alex. Stay calm, he muttered to himself, trying to keep his composure. He knew orcas sometimes interacted with boats, especially rudders, which seemed like toys to them. But that didn't make the situation any less frightening. He scanned the water, looking for the other orcas. They were still nearby, circling, but the large female seemed particularly interested in the Aurora. She dove again, and seconds later, another impact struck the rudder. This time, the crack was louder, and the rudder jammed. Panic surged through Alex. Without the rudder, he couldn't control the boat's direction. The current was pulling him, and the wind, now at 20 knots, made the Aurora heel dangerously. He ran to the cockpit, checking the GPS. He was 2 miles from Turn Island, a safe anchorage, but without steering, getting there would be nearly impossible. He tried using the auxiliary engine to gain some control, but the damaged rudder made the boat unmanageable. He grabbed the VHF radio, hesitating. Calling the Coast Guard was an option, but he didn't want to give up so soon. Alex was stubborn, a trait that had carried him through storms and long passages in the past. He decided to attempt an emergency repair. He went below deck, grabbing tools and a flashlight. The access to the steering system was tight, but he managed to reach the rudder shaft. There was a visible crack, but not a complete break. He used reinforced duct tape and a clamp to improvise a fix, knowing it was temporary. Back in the cockpit, he tested the rudder. It worked, but sluggishly. The boat responded slowly, and every movement required effort. The orcas were still nearby, but seemed to have lost interest, swimming away. Alex breathed a sigh of relief, but he knew the situation was still critical. The wind was picking up, and dark clouds were forming on the horizon, signaling an approaching cold front. He needed to reach Turn Island before the weather worsened. As he adjusted the sails to hold his course, Alex reflected on what had just happened. As a biologist, he understood that the Orca was likely playing, testing the boat as part of its natural curiosity. But as a sailor, he couldn't ignore the danger. The Johnstone Strait was a constant reminder that at sea, humans were mere visitors subject to nature's rules. He looked to the horizon, where the sun was beginning to set, painting the sky. In shades of orange and purple, the Aurora inched forward, battling the current and wind. Alex gripped the helm firmly, feeling the weight of every decision. He didn't know if he would make it to Turn Island before the storm, but one thing was certain: this journey was just beginning, and the Johnstone Strait had much more to teach him. The sky over the Johnstone Strait had transformed. The orange glow of the sunset had given way to a blanket of dark clouds that seemed to swallow the light as they advanced from the northwest. Alex, still in the cockpit of the Aurora, held the helm with tense hands, feeling the resistance of the damaged mechanism. The wind was now blowing at 25 knots, with gusts that made the sails snap and the boat heel dangerously. The current, still in ebb, pulled the Aurora south, but without a fully functional rudder, Alex struggled to maintain his course toward Turn Island, just 2 miles away. The Orca incident had shaken him, but the approaching storm was an even greater threat. He knew the Johnstone Strait forgave no mistakes, and every second counted. Alex checked the GPS, confirming his position. The screen showed he was southwest of Hansen Island, with Turn Island just ahead. The anchorage there was known for its protection from northwest winds, with a muddy bottom that ensured good anchor holding. But getting there required precision, and the damaged rudder made every maneuver a battle. He tested the rudder again, turning the wheel slowly. The boat responded, but with frustrating sluggishness, as if reluctant to obey. The makeshift repair with duct tape and a clamp was holding, but Alex knew it wouldn't last long, especially with the constant impact of the waves. He looked at the sails, which quivered under the wind's force. The Genoa was partially furled, but the mainsail was still up, catching more wind than he wanted. Reducing the sails was essential to ease the pressure on the rudder, but going on deck amid the gusts was risky. Alex donned his life jacket, clipped himself to the safety line, and crawled to the mast. The waves were growing, some crashing against the hull and sending icy spray into his face. He gripped the sheets tightly, releasing the main halyard. The mainsail dropped with a heavy thud, and Alex tied it down quickly, feeling the boat stabilize slightly. Back in the cockpit, he adjusted the Genoa, furling it further. The Aurora now sailed at 3 knots, slower but more manageable. As he worked, Alex couldn't stop thinking about the Orca. The image of that dorsal fin cutting through the water, the impact against the rudder, the almost knowing look of the transient female, it all remained vivid in his mind. As a biologist, he knew orcas didn't attack humans in the wild. The interaction was likely playful, perhaps driven by curiosity or the instinct to test a strange object in their territory. But as a sailor, he felt a mix of respect and fear. The Johnstone Strait was their home, not his. He was just an intruder, and the Orca had made that clear. The VHF radio crackled, interrupting his thoughts. Alex grabbed the microphone, tuning to channel 16, used for emergencies and general communications. A robotic voice delivered the weather forecast. Gale warning for Johnstone Strait. Northwest winds 30 to 40 knots, seas 2 to 3 meters. Seek shelter immediately. He switched off the radio, cursing under his breath. The storm was worsening faster than he'd expected. Turn Island was his best shot, but he needed to act fast. Alex opened the nautical chart, fixed beside the GPS. He mentally traced the path to the anchorage, considering the currents and obstacles. The strait was narrow here, with submerged rocks near the Hansen Island coast and whirlpools formed by colliding currents. He needed to keep the Aurora in the center of the channel, but the damaged rudder made it tough. He decided to use the auxiliary engine for more control, starting the Yanmar with a low rumble. The engine helped, but the rudder still responded with a delay, forcing Alex to anticipate every move. The first heavy, cold raindrops began to fall, pelting the deck like pebbles. Alex pulled on his waterproof jacket, but the chill was already seeping into his bones. He looked to the horizon, where lightning illuminated the clouds, followed by thunder echoing through the mountains. The sea was rough, with 2-meter waves crashing against the bow, making the Aurora rise and fall like a roller coaster. Alex held the helm with both hands, muscles taut, as he tried to keep the boat on course. Then he saw Turn Island in the distance, a dark silhouette against the stormy sky. The anchorage lay in a sheltered bay, protected by a peninsula that blocked northwest winds, but the entrance was narrow, requiring a precise maneuver. Alex checked the depth with the sonar, confirming the bottom was at 10 meters, ideal for anchoring. He prepared the anchor, a 15-kilogram Danforth, ensuring the chain was ready to deploy. The rain now fell in sheets, reducing visibility, and the wind howled, making the rigging hum. Alex aligned the Aurora with the bay's entrance, but a sudden gust caught him off guard. The boat heeled to starboard, and the rudder seized for a moment. He turned the wheel hard, feeling the resistance, and the boat returned to course, but just barely. His heart pounded, adrenaline surging through his veins. He couldn't afford mistakes now. With the engine at low throttle, he guided the Aurora into the bay, where the waves subsided, shielded by the peninsula. He released the anchor, letting the chain slide until he felt the resistance of the bottom. The boat stopped, swaying gently. Safe for now, exhausted, Alex collapsed onto the cockpit seat, rain streaming down his face. He looked around, seeing the trees of Turn Island bending under the wind. Thunder still rumbled, but the bay offered a temporary refuge. He checked the rudder again, going below to the steering compartment with a flashlight. The crack in the shaft had widened, and the makeshift clamp was starting to give. He needed a sturdier repair, but that would require tools he didn't have on board. For now, he reinforced the fix with more duct tape and a metal splint scavenged from a spare part. Back in the cabin, Alex dried off with a towel and made hot tea, trying to warm his trembling hands. He opened his notebook, writing about the Orca incident and the storm. As he wrote, he reflected on what had brought him here. He had always been driven by an insatiable curiosity, a desire to understand the natural world. But there was something deeper, a need to find meaning in solitude. Sailing alone was his way of meditating, of facing his fears and discovering who he truly was. But the Johnstone Strait was testing him in ways he hadn't anticipated. The storm raged for hours, but around midnight the wind began to ease. Alex stepped onto the deck, checking the anchor. It held firm, and the aurora remained steady. He looked at the sky where the clouds were parting, revealing bright stars. The silence was almost otherworldly after the storm's chaos. He grabbed the binoculars, scanning the water around the bay. There was no sign of the orcas, but he knew they were still out there, patrolling the strait. The next morning, the sun shone again, and the strait looked calm, as if the storm had never happened. Alex decided to use the day to attempt a rudder repair. He dove into the cold water, using a dive mask to inspect the rudder beneath the boat. The blade was misaligned, but not broken. He returned aboard, using an improvised jack to realign the shaft. The work was slow and grueling, but by noon the rudder was functional again, though not perfect. With the boat in minimal condition, Alex resolved to continue his journey. He wanted to reach Port Neville, his original anchorage, and complete the strait crossing. He hoisted the sails, adjusting them for a light 10-knot breeze, and sailed, cautiously, testing the rudder with every maneuver. The aurora responded, but Alex knew he had to avoid sharp movements. As he sailed, he spotted the orcas again at a distance. This time they were residents, judging by the curved dorsal fins and the larger group, with calves swimming alongside their mothers. He smiled, feeling a mix of relief and awe. These orcas showed no interest in the boat, focused on hunting salmon. Alex grabbed his camera, taking photos while jotting details in his notebook. He felt that, despite the danger, the encounter with the transient orca had changed him. He had learned to respect the sea's power and the intelligence of its creatures even more. Upon reaching Port Neville, Alex anchored in a tranquil bay surrounded by dense forests. He shut off the engine, feeling the silence envelop the boat. Sitting on the deck, he gazed at the strait, now calm under the evening light. The journey had tested him, the damaged rudder, the storm, the solitude, but it had also transformed him. He felt a deeper connection to the sea, not just as a scientist, but as someone who had learned to listen to its secrets. Alex opened his notebook, writing a final entry. The Johnstone Strait is not just a place. It's a teacher, a challenge, a mirror. Here, I found the orcas, but I also found myself. He closed the notebook, knowing this story of danger, resilience, and respect for nature would stay with him forever.